Hey, welcome back to the Drawing Database. Professor Marc Leone here, and we're going to work now with a French academic Degas style, early Degas in the French Academy's Ingres Degas type of style, contour line. And we're going to separate this video or the upcoming subsequential videos here with this contour line drawing, and then we're going to take it to a graphite value block-in and then show you how to use the cardboard stump to smooth the graphite, and then do a full value study from the head and torso and upper arm reach. We're not going to do the whole thing. It'll take too long, but I think this will be good to see that. And this can work as good contour line education for the figure, and we can connect it to the French academies of the 19th and 18th centuries as well. So let's dive in even further here. So working on the head. So I've got the contrast a little bit higher. I'm keeping this video now a little bit lighter contour line. It's not just for a finish, because if it was, we'd go a little bit darker. I think what's going to make this difficult for you is, since I'm taking it to a finish, is that what's missing is going to be structure and gesture, keeping it in our mind. So when artists were working for finished studies, etc., they could show their work or they could hide it. And I'm going to choose to hide it this time. So it's going to take a little bit longer, but you've got to learn to begin to keep the gesture and the volumetric figure locked in your mind and utilize it in your mind, and then draw that on paper a little bit. So it's particularly challenging. So we'll do some light lay-in and really work with that contour line and get that contour line to sing a little bit. And then as we end this video for this section, we'll do a little head rendering of just blocking in the values to give it a little bit of a focal point through there. So keeping it very light, I'm using graphite. I'm using a B softness pencil, which is not very soft. It's not very hard either. It's kind of right in the kind of Goldilocks middle range, if you will, of value. And so that you can expect that to be quite fairly easy to work with, not necessarily too soft, where you feel like it's just getting too dark too quick with even a light touch, and not too hard where you're scratching on the paper. So you can see how I've got a feel for a little gesture there. We don't want to get too constructive with it, but you can see this light, very wispy light lay-in that I'm getting with their arm coming up there. I've got the head shape there, arm coming up to the hand there, a raised bit. So we want to keep that very light. Notice I'm keeping the pencil further away from from the tip, so it's almost like a conductor view. You'll see me use the palm method, and a little bit more, probably a lot more, of the conductor method, where I have the fingers holding the shaft of the pencil much further out, like I'm doing right there. It depends on my body position and what I want, but we've got to keep this fairly light, drawing very light. I'm working on a BFK Reeves cotton paper, so it's softer, more elegant paper. And I suggest when you're starting to get more advanced and you want to begin to work nicer, finished studies, is that you go on to a better paper. So this is Reeves BFK. I cut it down to 18 by 24, which is kind of normal, standard American academic school drawing pad size. So the lay-in will get more shape-oriented than you've seen me have done in the past, and that's because we want to keep our construction method very light and minimal, so it doesn't get in the way or erode the final product there, which is what we're going for, our contour line. I think let's go ahead and throw that up now, so we can see the model and also the contour line. Let's do that. Can we put that up? All right, so we got that up, and that's good. You can see the image of what we're going for this contour line and the variation of the line weight, even though it's on the lighter side. And I've got some of the contrast booted up. I made a few changes. I reduced the size of the foot just a touch. I made the head just a little bit bigger, and I put the back foot a little bit further back, or to give her a little bit more of a straddled look. Those are things I liked. And I'm going to change the hand later on. It's a little big there, but ultimately it's kind of nondescript there. And so again, back to where I'm drawing now, I'm getting a very light feel for the movement around the model, getting the shoulder area to fit into the rib cage, and then around the trapezius in the back, and then here the front, the pectoral there downward. So I'm thinking very much kind of a triangular shape coming down to the tip of the breast form. And you can see me get the rib cage where it would be flat without the breast form attached to it, where I'm drawing now. And of course, using horizontal and vertical alignment. You really, it's slow. This takes about an hour and 40-minute video to get to that contour line, and that's fairly slow. If I was working a little bit looser and more gestural or sketchy like I like to, it's certainly faster. But it's a slower type pace, but it's got a nice, effects to that. And so as we push forward in the video to the next section after this one, it would be another video. We'll start introducing the stump technique in graphite, and I'll show you a couple of images by Degas that we're using kind of as our teaching sort of guide for this technique, and how clean it is, and how the introduction of graphite kind of changed this process. Before that, it was mostly chalk in the Renaissance and Baroque and beyond, and they moved to graphite, which was new, but probably easier to and cheaper to process too as well. So that was another addition, in addition to black chalk, and then ultimately charcoal pencil, and also sticks. So getting a feel for the back as it arches through, slowing it down. I'm using my gesture, my volumetric figure, but I'm not drawing it. And so I can't show you what I can't draw, or not using to draw, but it's there. And that makes this process slower. So I get questions from time to time, and there's some of my favorite questions, and it goes like this: how come the old masters didn't draw construction lines? And the answer is sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. And even if they didn't, we wouldn't necessarily be able to tell, especially if it's a more finished drawing, because it's going to get covered up. Sometimes they did. They certainly did in their training, and then they were taught to ultimately cover it up. Two things about that. Number one, aesthetically, for their purposes, it looked a little bit better, although I think the sketchy kind of look of the master, the kind of a general statement of the master studies looks great. That sketchy look, sometimes better than the paintings. And number two, beyond the aesthetic, was to hide their process, whatever differences that existed between a studio of one master to the other would be highly guarded and kept secret. They were not shared. Drawings were preparatory, they were educational, they were not means to an end like they can be in the 21st century, and really in the late 19th century. So drawing was considered preparation and skill building, and like we have photography today, artists that draw and paint use photography much in the same way to pose models, much as they did in the 17th, 18th, 19th century. So photography has changed that. So now I'm getting a feel for the kind of teardrop shape of the breast form as it rests gently against the rib cage, but attaches much higher up to the pectoral, but does hang down lower to about the 8th rib or so, and 9th rib in her case, on either side. So a lot of times you'll see this method in Russian constructive sort of academy drawing, and also French Academe drawing, where we get more of a angled kind of approach, not necessarily sight size, but somewhat closer to sight sizing, but we're not. We're just shorthanding all the work and keeping it in our mind as we go forward. And of course, you can see where we're going to wind up too. And so we'll get a lot of these lighter lines laid in, and then we'll come back and over and give the line work more variation that we need to get overlapping and get some depth going in our drawing. But the line work is not the final purpose. So I'm making a little bit more of an issue of it with this drawing than since we're going to add some value tone to most of it. Getting it underneath of the pectoral. The high-res image will be at the back of this video so that you can use that. I would say print it off, or you screen capture it and use it on another computer or have it handy. And of course, you can see the three different models here. 3 different renditions, I suppose. Underneath the rib cage, where that comes up, feeling the cage-shaped qualities, it wraps around the rib cage. Just getting a feel of that rhythm. That's also where the core shadow will be. Things seem to be relatively in place in terms of scale and proportion. Getting the areola of the nipple just indicated here and underneath. So it's a longer methodology. There's nothing greatly emphasized in terms of weighted line. This drawing also favors comparatively to the basic section in the playlist for Contour Line, the Long Study. So you might want to go and take a look, check that out, with the still life with the bust of Augustine, and other various still life objects. But that is a means to an end as we work our way down a little bit here. Whereas this line work is emphasized for its description, but then ultimately will add value on top of it. So very much tighter approach. Again, a French academic, early Degas, French Atelier, like an 1830s, 19th century and 17th, 18th and 19th. And Charles Brock, and I believe it was Jerome, came along to develop the sight size technique of measurement and one-to-one proportion, but that's not this. It has a look too as well. So with the longer poses that I'm working on for the drawing database is to give you different materials and a scope for different processes throughout art history. A lot of these processes I don't necessarily use that often, like this one, but it is useful and fun, but challenging in that of keeping the construction in the mind, which slows it down. Those cross contour lines that I'm pointing to and working on right there are not on the model, but they indicate turning and shadow where I want to turn and give the model 3 dimension. And you can see the lima bean of the model expanding on the left and contracting as the hips push slightly forward. Again, with the B pencil, I'm not pushing down very hard, and it's not a particularly soft pencil. And working on my angles. There's a planar quality to this, so we're not getting every curve yet. we're simplifying that curve to get that lay in, and we can rework, and come down the model to get a more natural look that we wind up with. Getting a little bit under there where the lat attaches to the scapula, under through there, and the rib cage, the pectoral to that area. Teres major and minor, so your humerus can rotate, not up and down, but rotate, twist. So here I'm indicating a little bit of the shadow form. And we'll go in here to get the back of the deltoid here. That curved part of that muscle form that she has there. And it moves slightly in front of the rest of the back. You can see me push my line weight a little darker. Working down through the sacrum in there, that bone, the tail, what we call the tailbone. Is it? She's protruding at an angle. Now this part of the back will come forward. So that little pit of the back there, that's the spine, the sacrospinalis muscles, erector spinae, coming down to the sacrum. That's important. See that little mark I made, that little dot where the abdomen is overlapped by a little bit by the pelvis, in through there in the adductor muscle, adductor muscle through there, that little straight area. It's about the width. We call that the 3-finger gap. See how it's kind of straight before we get to the sartorius and the rectus femoris, and so that's called a 3-finger gap. That you could put 3 of your fingers on your leg there, and your leg could bend and not touch those fingers. So did you see me work that from the belly over the rhythm to the back of the buttock, that glute back there? And coming down and around there to get that feeling. Don't be afraid to erase. We'll do a lot more erasing here. I'm using exclusively for now, the kneaded eraser, but I'll use other erasers. You want to be careful, keep your drawing very clean. I'm keeping my hand off the paper so I can reach it without dirtying it up. It's really important to keep a very clean product, clean paper here. So I'm double checking here, getting that 3-fingered gap there, that sartorius region area to come in front. That buttock will go a little darker underneath. So take it slow, work with me as you need, slow it down, speed it up however you want. Getting that pit of the back there, that top of the sacrum where that dark is where the right before the sacrum starts. Starting to mark where the 2 sides of it are, and then the split of the glutes coming down, the butt crack coming down. You notice her hips are tilted forward. See that from the belly, but also the shadow where the pelvis, the iliac crest is, tilts forward a little bit. Just feeling that rhythm coming up. I'll jump back up here a little bit. Feeling as the breast attaches to the rib cage there, and then we get some cast shadow underneath it. I'm going to get a little feeling of where that form shadow is just to locate it. And we'll work down the breast a little bit as it kind of pooches out a little bit on top of the, right there as we draw this. A little bit, not straight, but it's curving upward and it attaches to the rib cage about right there at the top, and up to the rest of the pectoral, up to the sternum, and then over to the clavicle, up and through there. The other divot of the sacrum there. It helps to know what you're drawing. If you know the anatomy, it's great. If not, that's okay. It helps to know. There's no doubt about it. But I was doing good drawings long before I put anatomy together. So don't despair. It gives you extra knowledge, especially when you're drawing out of your head. You have to rely on that knowledge beyond what you see. Getting the back of the glute, the right one and the left here in the image, coming over. You want to feel that curve. See how it bisects there, it overlaps. You keep on coming there, coming around. It'll get a lot darker. You can see where I was, or I am now, where I'm going to wind up, the finished contour line part of it. And that end of that muscle later on will attach to the leg bone, the femur there a little bit. So we can't see how it gets a little bit darker towards the curve of the ending of the buttock there. We need that to overlap the hamstring or the back of the biceps femoris area. And we feel that little gathering there at the back of the leg. Move it down so we can see. See, I threw a little gesture line out there. I'm locating where I think the knee is, horizontal, vertical alignment, past the breast a little bit. Be right in through there. It feels where I want to put it, so I can mark that. Throw a little gesture there, just a line. Keep it very light. So this is tougher. It's longer for me because I've got to keep all that information in my mind. I don't have to put it on the paper. And you might say, well, that was extra work. Yeah, but it's so simple work too, that this is more complex because you have to keep it for a lot longer. Nevertheless, it's hidden. It's all hidden at the end. We got to keep our drawing clean for this tighter style, if you will. It's still fairly loose compared to a hyper-real drawing. Finding that curve over to the end of the knee on the back side there, where that tendon is. Feeling where it ends, getting a good feeling. So I'm thinking about gesture, and I'm thinking about volume, and I'm also thinking a lot about shape and form, and using axis and width alignment. Remember that technique where we look at the center of the form and then we use our peripheral vision to find the largest bulge. I'm using that as well. If you don't know what that is, check it out in the playlist section of the figure and find axis, width, and peripheral vision. Work on that video and that will give you a better sense of what I'm thinking, what's going through my head. All the techniques we work with the figure are going through my head. You see how I take much greater pain to slow down to correct where I need to, even though I'm simplifying. As that buttock ends, it comes to the back of the hamstring there. You can see me dabbing at, erasing as I need to get that shape the way I want it. And so that overlaps right there. So that's going to get a overlapping darker line right in through there to pull that form in front of that leg, in front of that back buttock, and that area in front of the back with the belly in the middle there, the abdomen. So feeling that rhythm across, that curve kind of bowl. Wrapping around. It's slow and meticulous, I know. Yep, it is. To get it correct. You might get it correct the first time. Just want to be accurate because I don't have the luxury of correcting it and then covering it up. So it's got to be more super accurate. Getting that bulge, I'm comparing that bulge to the top of the leg, and you see how I'll curve that top area of the quads a little bit further. I'm going to change that knee a little bit. So it's good to see how that process, how I ultimately wind up where I do with the drawing next to it in the model, and then how I get there. You know, showing that process, which is so key to getting what you need. So now I'm feeling that back leg. I want to go ahead and get those laid in to get a feel for them. Where they're going to be located. That tendon around the knee, where the knee ends, to get the proper bend. I'm going to pull that leg up a little to give her a little bit more of a staggered stance. A little bit of parallax in the photography, so I'm going to make the feet a little smaller here too, as well. Feel this bulge here, and I'm looking at, not only as I draw, looking at the middle of the leg, and looking what I draw, but also the back side, to make sure I get that tilt of the angle of the quad against the hamstring. They're not parallel, but they're off axis. It means they're tilted. And again, it's not a very dark graphite pencil. It's darker than what it looks to be. I've bumped the contrast up a decent amount so we can see it a little bit better. Keep yours pretty lined. And right in there where that muscle group overlaps, the glute overlaps the biceps femoris area. Really the semitendinous and membranous on the inside too. It basically overlaps that leg just a little bit. We'll come down to locate the knee further. Coming up just gently to find where the shadow pattern is, a little bit of the tendon there. 3 different tendons that come into that area on the top part. That little dark area that I made makes that muscle form start to come into the leg and not stay on the outside. You'll see me stop and dab erase quite a bit to make sure I get it correct. And I still get things that like the hand will be too big. I'll have to adjust that down. Getting the condyles of both the femur and the tibia and the fibula. Get that to overlap a little bit where that knee is. That large tendon area there. So continuing on. Feeling a little bit of that curve around the leg and the back there where that joint can move forward and backwards, a little curve, a little dark kind of line through there. So feel where I want see how the knees are raised, and my knees are a little higher, leave it just a touch higher. And so I just kind of mark that, a little marking there for me so it's where I want kind of where the joint's going to be. I make the change from the upper leg to the lower leg. I want to find the back of the leg here, where it pooches out a little bit here, this extra fat gather. And we'll come down. Over to that little back part, middle to back leg where that tendon comes in front there, right there. Break that off, make that a little bit darker. We're thinking 3-dimensionally quite a bit, even with line. We're getting 3D with their line weight. Part of a tendon there. Finishing this top part of the leg here behind the left leg. Make sure that overlaps with the stronger, darker line. Even when we're just doing a very light lay-in. A little dimensionality to our line weight and our line work for sure. So we're a little past 30 minutes into the drawing here. Things seem to be working pretty well. So I'm going to get a very light gesture. See that one little armature, very light, just to feel that flow coming through. Feel where we're going to put her leg downward. As it moves back in perspective away from us at an angle. So we're looking about eye level with the model. Even though she's elevated, our camera person was pretty tall. Just a little bit more curve in there, so go back and double check See what we want there. Working the back of the leg as we start the calf region down to the ankle region here. So giving a little, see that little light kind of flow gesture. Just to show a little bit of what I'm thinking down to that foot. We'll get to the foot, lower foot in a moment with the camera. Do a little light sketching in there, pre-planned to help locate these complex forms, but horizontal, vertical, diagonal alignment. The movement of the kinetic spirit of the pose, and then thinking three-dimensionally are all live here. And so to get that foot nice and pointed out. Bit, pull that little bit of line weight with just a touch of value, just to give it dimension there further with line weight variation. Gonna feel with that tibialis anterior ligament. There's the ligament for that muscle in the front there. And slightly change of direction now as she kind of has that leg bent by the bottom so that the leg is fully extended. And coming down the calf leg a little bit. That tends to get straight there, whereas the back will get curved. It's true bone on the left side. That's the tibia region. And this is more on the back lateral here. So that's curved part of the calf. And then I can take away that little gesture line that I kept going. I can take that right off. See how light that is? Just keep it super light. Let me jump back up here for a moment. You know, very different feeling, very different process from other period methodologies from different time frames of art history. Getting that back. So there's the spine, it's darker at the bottom, and then you see where it's a little lighter coming up the back. We've got to develop that split of the spine. It's so important. When we look at the back, that's the right side of the back. There's a middle there that we need to get coming down her body. Feeling those little subforms in here to get that dimension. That's harder drawing if you're not quite sure. Just stay with it. I'm feeling that kind of rounded motion of that bone. And tendon and the fibula's about right there. Attached to the back lateral part of the tibia. And you can see the end of it down where the ankle is. calf downward, feeling that bulge. Now we can move the camera now back down to the foot. We see the back of the heel. See how it aligns pretty closely to the front of the knee? Looking for that to help control where the heel is going to stop. Just getting a feeling for some of the tendons, the fibularis brevis and longus. Those little bumps I just drew. I'll come back to that heel in a moment. Look back of that leg a little bit more substantial now. In the knee area. Right through there. And that calf will go in front of it. Need a little bit more of a curve. Looks like I'll curve that maybe just a little. Maybe not. See that move I just made? That was where I'm marking the angle now. A little bit slightly in front of the knee. Just a touch. Even if I missed it, as long as I keep it at the knee, it's fine. It's time-consumptive drawing. Without drawing, this is a good argument of, hiding your work is great, but it's hard work when you do that. So coming back to the Achilles tendon here, the gastrocnemius, or the calf, and the soleus connect back to the back of the heel, the calcaneus bone. So what I'm thinking with the feet now is triangular wedges in different positions, 3/4 for each one, front, top, looking down. So I'm thinking about a wedge as I'm drawing details. So triangular wedgy kind of form there. Just going to help. Let's go ahead and move. Okay, good. We got our foot. That image moved over so we can see our foot as I draw that a little bit. I reduced the size of the feet just a little, not by a lot, but just a touch. I feel a touch big to me. And you can do that, especially with females. It's a little more, I suppose, smaller, daintier feet. That might be sexist. It's not meant to be. So I'm thinking about triangular wedge here. I'm thinking about a triangular box wedge. There's going to be some shadow come off that. So this foot, we're looking down at the top, then we see the right side. As we travel down to the side, you can see where the shadow is where that plane is. These are tendons coming down here from those two front muscles, the tibialis anterior and I forget the other one. So I always forget the names. I know the shapes, I forget the names. Every time I have to teach anatomy, I have to go back and relearn the names I forget. The shapes I know because I draw them all the time, but the names I forget. But that's my thinking, is a foot wedge. And we're going to simplify the toes. You can see where I wind up. There's no need to draw every one. We can draw the shadow shape around it and a little bit of an outside edge, but we want to think ultimately about getting a good triangular wedge coming from the main part of that foot. Excuse me. Coming down here outside the foot, past the tendon a little bit, right there's the tendon. You can see that. There's two sets there. Feeling that outside shape there, past that little hump right there's the fifth metatarsal. It's got a little bit of a bump there, right there, that whole area. So you can see how her foot, triangular wedge. Go take a look at foot anatomy. In the anatomy section, or the foot, the general foot concept of a triangular wedge in my figure section, which will help to help gear my thinking. So the volumetric figure is very much alive in this drawing, in this contour line. Not only is the flow or the direction of each form, but also the three-dimensionality. So we've got this big toe. Notice how the toe, the ending condyle bone, will point upward, and then the rest of the toes will come downward to grab, to adhere to the floor a little bit. So we simplify these shapes, just trying to get a feeling as they curve around, they make a curve. And that's enough to show the gesture of the foot. We simplify these feet quite a bit. And then I'll separate a little bit where the shadow of the condyle, of the big toe there, that proximal condyle against the medial, which is the last. A little bit of shadow there just to separate. So I don't want to get too fussy with the feet. We keep them very simple. The focal point is in the head and the torso region, and that's where we'll keep that. You see that a lot. We learn that from time and aesthetics and good master drawing study, for sure. That's something that you can do when you have full figures that are not terribly large. You can simplify to a volumetric-ish kind of human-looking volumetric foot until you want to turn it to completely real. Or you can leave it if it's not going to be a focal point. Get a little bit of the abdomen. Clean up a little bit. See how the abdomen, that line diagonal, see how it flows down through to the back leg? That's important to see that rhythm. We'll get this tensor fascia latae region. Call that the Starbucks muscle. For obvious reasons, I think. And the iliotibial tract or band right in through here. We really don't see that with most models. It's just kind of where the core shadow is. Getting a little turn with that core shadow, cross contouring just to tell myself that that's turning quite nicely there. So a little shadow on this leg just to show myself. It's a cast shadow down there from the body on the leg. We get that little darker area within the form shadow. That's why it's darker. So we have a leg already in shadow and some shadow, and we get a cast shadow on top of that. I'll make it a little bit darker. It's like a double shadow there. Can feel that I'm going to push that leg back a little bit at more of a diagonal. Right about there. See how it's a little bit lower? I like it a little bit pushed back just to give it some movement back there. Don't want to do it too much, although, and I probably, I made her foot a little bit, man, it's about the same size. About the same size. Just a slightly different position. You don't have to do that. See how that darker line pulls that buttock forward, the forward leg there, just a little bit with a darker overlap. Thinking about the calf, thinking about its fullness as it moves outward there. You can see my little, I left myself a little gesture there. You see that light gesture line? I left myself just a little there, just to help me along. It will be easily disappeared by eraser or by tone, but we'll erase it out. With clean contour drawing that this is, you really have to work to keep your, again, your gesture and your volume buried or in your mind only, which makes it much harder. Get a nice fullness in the back of that calf, probably a little bit more rounded. Yeah, I thought so. Compared to what I've drawn to the middle there. Get that tendon right there to separate this. It comes down, it overlaps. And right there's where the shadow breaks a little bit along the middle part of that back of the calf there. Gastrocnemius, and get that shadow. And then back down to the end of the soleus and Achilles, to the Achilles tendon there. Coming through where that shadow is tells me, you can see how it bulges over a little bit. It's probably too high. I'm just kind of following the shadow, maybe a little bit lower. But I do raise that foot. Now we're drawing against that bone. So we see mostly bone and the head part of that calf right through there. So we'll make it a little darker where that would normally turn in with a gesture or a volume line. That curve on that bone on the tibia there, probably a little bit wide, we can go a little bit more narrow. But those little markings down at the bottom tell me where I want my heel to be, so I can flesh out the lower leg here to the foot, which is again another triangular three-dimensional wedge block that was moving perpendicular to the other foot. They are at 90-degree change. Nothing easy about this drawing here. This is the inner part of the foot there. Feeling where that condyle of the tibia will be. So I take my gesture off now. Lots of little nitpicky erasing. You see me doing that quite a bit? It's very different than I would normally do with academic stuff. It doesn't really matter. Whatever it takes to get that. But normal kind of academic stuff that I do. The drawing database, you won't see me erase a lot. Because we can go back over, be a little bit less forgiving. Here we can't be. It's a technique that doesn't allow for as many flaws or corrections on the fly. The corrections can be a really interesting part of the drawing to see the thinking. Here we don't see the thinking as much. Excuse me. we leave the thinking, we erase the thinking, if you will. In some respects, not completely. Because what we're left with was what we're thinking, what we're drawing, but we're certainly leaving some of the construction away. But it takes, as you can see, it takes more patience and longer. It's just a different look and aesthetic too. No doubt about that. Moving back towards slightly with the Achilles, off the soleus, that long tendon, now down to the calcaneus bone. So I can see my triangular wedge right there, that plane change right, coming up, it hits the ground, it's moving towards, back to the other foot, right, coming up there, right. Yeah, kind of like the shadow. That same kind of direction is the main thrust of the other foot, which makes it 90-degree change. Throw a little shadow there. Just that could be a little, obviously, see how light and gesture that is, because it doesn't have to be perfect. Just getting an indication of the foot in body and shadow there. I'll do the other side here a bit. Sometimes I'll do that. I know my thinking, to take a break from drawing a difficult passage a little bit. It's kind of very, very quick procrastination in your own drawing. I know exactly why I'm doing that, just to give my brain a break for a second. Right there, it's pretty stressed on that tendon, so that line got darker. And the other side of the tendon there coming in as it attaches to the heel, which is rounded but kind of boxy. I know that's an oxymoron, or it's a kind of a strange, ironic statement. Ironical. Maybe carve around. That's a strong 90-degree change right there, but it's a curved on the bottom change. So we get to that back of the heel, and then we turn to the left side of where we're drawing the foot, and it goes in a very different direction, doesn't it? Again, a triangular wedge. We've drawn part of the back of the wedge and a little bit of the top. Okay, and we know now we need to draw the front top and then the full left side of that triangular wedge. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and take a look at the figure section towards the end of the playlist, where we look at the feet and think of the feet as a triangular, nice kind of a shoe or sock wedge that we can project on in, as we practice that, onto our drawing in our mind, or draw on it and then draw contour line on top of it. So it's a lattice, it's a skeleton. Lots of ways to help our brain and our hand and our mind come together. And that takes repetition. Feeling that tendon in the left side, feeling the condyle, the malleolus of the inner ankle there, the medial malleolus. I'll throw a little tone there just to give it a little bit of dimension for the feet to help out. You can see how slow and painstaking this is to get it correct. finally start working the difficult part of the foot, making that change to move forward now. There's a good strong line, a guideline to tell me we're moving. Look at the big change. Now the medial part of, the middle part of the foot there, it curls underneath, right in through there. It's kind of like a boot, isn't it? Which makes sense since we're drawing what boots cover. Get the undergirding of that foot as it turns. This gradual turn, and then this goes behind the heel. Heel will come slightly forward. It's looking pretty resolved there. Right in through there is a little darker spot as it turns. It's a very slight change. And that calcaneus bone will come out a little bit as it turns. It's very, very smooth on that side of the foot as it gradually turns from the ankle down to the bottom of the foot. The other side is more substantial, more box-like, and it's a very strong, more angular dive. You can see the difference in the feet on either side. That's where the opening of the footprint would be, where the foot doesn't touch the ground. So we have a little darker space into there with a little bit of shadow. Not where I'm drawing now, but right previously before in the middle of the foot. And we'll come around that heel bone. And kind of box that off right in through there. And we'll draw a little fabric over the top of it. Like to put a little shadow here just to give a little bit of volume and emphasis to that foot. Sometimes line is not enough. Feeling that diagonal placement. So feeling that wedge, that bottom part of that condyle of the foot. It comes in, gets overlapped by the back part of the condyle, then over the top of the triangular box of the big toe. And then we're going to put all these grouping of toes together, simplify them. See how they make a shape? Like a sock. Now I'm thinking it like a sock there. That's the top plane. The side plane ends kind of where the top of the big toe starts, in the middle part of it. It's well lit, so a little bit of the top and a little bit of the side are lit, so it makes it difficult to discern where it is. I'll take a better stab at it. Sometimes I'll draw it. Gets it pretty good, but I thought let me go ahead and take another pass at it. A little bit of a straight there, and then we're going to get the toe under part of the big toe to come underneath a little bit right there, through there, and then get across to the tip of the toe, slightly pointing upward. And it's so small there. I'm not blowing up the image because we want to keep our distance similar to that experience as if we were in a room with a model. Getting the head of that back part of the condyle there where the nail, not quite where the nail starts, but almost. It really curves over. That little curve is important. And then where the toes kind of end, that's where that sliding part of the right part of the wedge of the foot is. It doesn't end straight. It slides back over to the back side a little bit. And then we'll get this part of the ankle and that tendon right there to come forward. That's a tendon through there, and then come over just a little bit. And that's starting to look like a pretty good foot. And then we'll get the line of those toes in through there. Keep it simple. They're mostly in shadow slightly, but they're delineated by their differences of their shape, the shadow between a little bit. And we'll just throw a little bit of the platform wedge there, where she's standing on. Will give a sense of position and where she's at. So we're looking slightly above the model there, just to get a sense of place. Just good to have that. I have all my students do that to give a sense of grounding of where that model is going to be. So pick up a straight edge here, just something I've got in the studio. Couldn't find my other triangle, but just to give that a little bit more of a strong edge, just to give it a purpose of sitting down. Sometimes I'll just use a straight edge, just to make that nice. I'm not going to do the whole thing, just a nice silhouette of it, or a vignette of it, small part of it. Draw kind of a straight where I want it. Get that line to stand up there. All right, now moving on to tightening up the head and a little bit of the arm here as we start to get to the final stages of the contour line. You can see where we've done mostly so far, and then where we're going to wind up at now with the head here, so we can get a little bit more detailed and more subtle. We have our very good, very light lay-in of our drawing contour, a quicker contour, and then we're going to tighten up that contour with drawing on top of that now, going in through the neck area. Neck to the chin. It's a wicked little head position because we don't really see any eyes. We see just a shadow emerging, just a touch. I'm going to start to give the focal point to the head, and I'll do a little shadow rendering underneath the chin here and the jaw to turn that away from the light there. So we can emphasize the head in our contour line, give it a focal point, and come up the underarm here, just back of the arm, the trapezius area. Get that elbow to curve. It's a nice, interesting position there with the muscles and the condyles of the elbow, the forearm on the right side, and then the left side there a little bit, and then the condyle and the gathering of the skin there, which comes a little bit of a hollow. And you see the two little dimples there where the condyles of the ulna and the radius come to connect in their interesting joint configurations, both kind of a spool and a kind of a cup, sort of leverage cup, C-clamp shape. And so we're drawing them now with the skin there. So we draw these little dimples, these little shadow shapes. And that's where the forearm starts to overlap, where the head bisects that, and we'll trying to feel that width over where that dimple is running through there. So it's protruding over, and then you get these interesting muscles that come off that. It's kind of called the olecranon area. It's going to try and get her in orientation, although it's kind of hard to see there. So we draw what we see too. A little bit of part of the bicep now on the right here. Notice a darker line because we're going to get darker with the hair, so that's going to overlap. It's overlapping the head. So we want to go a little darker there with our line. Excuse me. Notice how I kind of gently dab at the line to erase it. I'm not pressing down very hard at all. I'm not abrading the paper. It's a very, very gentle kind of technique. Get that form to come over. Just feeling the width of that dimple, that void there, a little hollow. We have that brachioradialis, I believe, on the right side there, on top of the bicep that helps torque that arm in coming over. Attaches onto the humerus and then onto the ulna and radius area. So I'm going to kind of just fill in a little tone there where I need to, these little dark cavities where that skin gathering in the back of the arm there. Feeling the head come around. See, I'm drawing through a little bit where just the brow peeks through. Right there. A little bit of the eyebrow. Just a touch darker there. And here we get into very tiny, tight area. We really keep this into symbols. And the nose is very triangular, little curves. We get to the front septal part there, the cavity. But the general shape there is a triangle. Very, very tight area. Tip of the nose coming over. So we get a little bit of the nostril. We get a little bit of we're underneath a little bit. So we're definitely, she's definitely above us if we see the nostril there. So we're a little bit below her, not a whole lot, because we don't see quite the top of the head, but we don't see underneath the jaw too much. So we're just slightly below her. So most of this is shape on the profile, and then we're going to feel this nostril a little bit, and we'll start to feel a little shadow. It's the best way to probably describe it here, since we're going to take it to a rendering, kind of a French style drawing there. And then a little bit of just a touch of with that brow. Really the socket would be just a shadow of the eyeball on that medial, well, a little lateral part of the nose in there, that side plane of the nose. The nose socket is. A little bit of the nostril emerging. You'll see me clean this up better as I get further into the face later. It's very tight. You need to know hopefully what you're drawing, what you're seeing, so you can symbolize it and keep it simple in there. It starts to get pretty tight. It's mostly shape. A little bit of tone, but we're thinking form too. drawing shape, putting it together to get this to symbolize what we want with her lips. Closed mouth, we're going to get a curve on this lip, a little bit of the philtrum there. Top lip curved over. And if you want to magnify for your face, that's okay. Just take your image and screenshot the image in the back of the video, and then you can put it on your computer next to this and bump it up a little bit. Turn the chin there as it protrudes outward and comes downward to here. It's going to curl up and around and then go on up and in to where the shadow shape is as it overlaps. It's a little blurry there. We can get that back. And the shadow does really the rest as it overlaps and comes in front of. We'll get that arm to come in front, a little darker line there. There we go. Let's get a little bit more of this lip and cheek. A little bit of that protrusion downward where the jaw and the cheek and the mouth meet together. The little dot, the little dash is the node there as it kind of moves downward. A little bit of the underneath of the lip there. Pretty delicate little area. Just a touch of the jaw and the cheek under the zygomatic arch and through there. A little hollow space where the mandible and the buccinator muscle is between your jaw. And that little patch underneath the mouth there, little straight area. Put a little tone there just to give it 3D or a contour drawing. So we add a little bit of tone, which is fine. Just a touch is fine. We don't want to be all tone because it wouldn't be a contour line drawing then. It gives you a good sense of where we're at. We'll move over now to the other side of the head and the arm here. I can feel a little bit where that shadow is. Right in through there. It kind of set me up for the next phase. See where that turns, that core shadow is. So I'm just giving a little bit of tone. It's harder to get line. You can get line there. You can get cross contouring, but since we're going to shade, I'm a full shaded head and torso. We're gonna get use a little bit more tone in through there. Where that dimple is. Come in front a little bit. See how that dark area pulls that arm forward in front of her head. Makes it make sure that that is in front of by an overlap line and a darker line too. It's not enough to overlap. We need thicker line weight as well. Come down the back of the shoulder, deltoid to the trapezius here. That little muscle that's contracting to allow the arm to raise. Gets her to turn down that back, and we'll work on that back a little bit here. So sometimes you'll see me start one way and I'll change my hand position. I'm like, that's not, I want a different hand position to make the line movement that I want, the direction of the flow, a little bit more congruent to what I'm drawing. It's harder doing these drawings flat. That's my problem. You don't have to worry about it. But when we're talking about hand direction and flow, it's important to get your body in the right position. That's why you might alter your drawing board quite a bit. You've seen me do that before. I try not to do it here too much. It's just harder to set up reset cameras, so I try not to. But it's a painstaking approach to draw, because I'm kind of bending over with my back. So you guys out there, help me pay my back medical bills. That should be fine. I'm pretty strong. But you can see that emerging there. Most of that's going to be in shadow. You can see where I'm going to go with that in a little bit. We'll just tone all that down in a moment, especially at the head. Coming through with these trapezius muscle and right, a little bit of the rhomboid, a little contracted and lifting along with the lat. Go back and alter this shape a little bit, this line, as it cascades downward. And it's going to come in front, and then beyond that, where that gets a little darker there, that's where the spine is, right in through there, and that's, well, it's in between there, and then we get the other part of the top of the scapula in the trapezius. You can see that spine coming through there. I'll put a little tone back there around it so we can see that. Then around it over. And that catches up to the back of the rhythm of the line back in through there. We can keep that pretty simple. But it's good to know where we're at in the drawing. You want to know where you're at with your forms. You may not be able to name them, but you want to know where you're at in the drawing to be able to push that line weight the way you want it to, the way you want it to read and to distinguish three-dimensional form here. So finish the top of the chest there where the pectoral is. And around here define a little bit of that shadow shape where that deltoid ends. We get to the back there where the scapula attaches up into it. We get a little depression there where Not where the shadow is, but that little lighter area. That area where she's got like a little birthmark area. And we'll pull this a little bit in front here, right in through here, make that feel. Get that pectoral region where it really stretches and attaches on the other side up onto her humerus up there behind the arm, in between the neck and the arm. So we're about 9 minutes left. So it took about an hour and a half, give or take some editing, probably a little bit less to get this laid in. Take the hair, take the pencil to the side. Well, I guess I'm going to come over here and get a little bit of the coarse shadow, and I can run that in with the head. See, I can put that shadow in with the head later on. I'll show you that direction. Just to kind of clear up that little part of her head there, coming forward, the back of the cranium, and then we'll put down this tone here. I can start there and render not only the arm but also the head together a little bit. When I pick up my pencil, I don't know if you've noticed it, I twirl it a little bit so that I keep moving the side of the pencil around once I draw for a little bit. When I pick it up, let's see. Right there, and then I'll twirl a little bit, and that tends to change the side that I'm drawing on ever so slightly. That keeps all sides kind of even. That's kind of a weird thing to think about, but it helps. And then we'll just, the back of her hair for now, I've got that cut off a little bit, but it's okay. Just getting just a very general sense of where that hair wrap is. Let's move that image over. Finishing it out here. See, it's kind of the multicolored hair, the blonder, lighter hair in there. Just feeling where the shape of the ear is, kind of a question mark shape in there. And just really just fluttery little gesture with rhythm and change. Don't get real fussy there. Just make it more, turn your pencil to the side, get a bunch of really just value wedging going on, value mass. Make that work for you pretty well. We'll tighten up a few areas around the back here and the breast form a little bit. Let you see that. Just putting on a little bit of the areola here. Let's go up to the hand a little bit. And we'll take a look at here. I make it a little bit big, and I'm going to reduce that. I'll reduce it later. It won't really become part of our finished study. It'll be with the head and the torso, a little bit of the other arm, or the hands attaching to the forearm there. But I'll show you the construction of that really quickly. It's a little bit too wide and too long. Sometimes part of working with photographic images, you get a little bit, your point of view changes quite a bit. It's unfortunate. But it's still correctable, easily to correct. So I'm going to get the turn of that hand over. Let's let you see it. It's a good hand, just it's too big. We'll change it, but I'll let you see it anyway. Just getting the turn of the wrist, the boxy form of the palm area. You can see where the big plane change is, where the side of the palm, where it's lighter, then it gets darker. That's the big boxy idea of the hand. A little bit of that ulna bone right there. A little hard condyle. The wrist. And we'll get the rest of this gesture of the hand. See, it's a little wide. See how much thinner I just made it too wide. It happens. It's good to notice it. I wish I had noticed it earlier. It's okay. It gets changed later. And just feeling the gesture of really the hand up through the fingers. You can see where it's wide from the wrist to that underside of the hand where it's in shadow is too wide. That threw off the size of the fingers and everything kind of fell apart. It's good to see it. It's good to see where I made a mistake, and then you can see where I can change. You don't get that with master drawings, that you see the mistakes. Sometimes you can see the mistakes or size proportion changes, but oftentimes you don't see the corrections that were made. You get the flow of the fingers a little bit off the camera there. It's okay. I think that gives a good idea of the hand position. Let's cut that. And then back to the more of the full figure there. So you can see what we kind of start to wind up with. And we're going to utilize now for the tone part of the drawing. So there we go. So that'll give you a good idea of a contour line there. And now we're ready to really move on to our tone, our graphite, and stump. All right, I'll see you there. Let's go to that one. Take care.